and welcome back to Yoga Off the Mat. My name is Emily and this series is all about yoga, the different elements that make up a yoga practice, going beyond just the poses that we practice on the mat. In this episode, we are looking at the final limb of yoga. If you're not sure what the limbs of yoga are, don't worry, I will explain in a little while. But in this episode, we're looking at the eighth and final limb, which is Samadhi. And this is the concept of enlightenment, of inner peace. So I'm just going to explain in this video, within the context of yoga, what that actually means, enlightenment, and how we can approach it in the modern world. If you are brand new to this channel, and if this is the first video you're seeing in this series, then I'd love it if you could give this video a like, if you enjoy it, if you find it useful. And if you'd like to learn a bit more about yoga in the modern world, as well as the traditions of yoga, then you can subscribe to this channel and you will see new videos from me every week. Some weeks, 2 videos, depending on how busy I am. So let's get into it, the idea of enlightenment. Let's start with the question, why do we practice yoga? In the modern world, there's a whole host of different answers that are completely valid for why you might practice yoga. It might be that you want to get a bit more flexible, or that you have an injury, something you're trying to recover from. It might be that you have an illness or a condition that yoga is really good for. It might be that you're trying to relieve stress, to learn to relax a bit more. And all of those reasons are perfectly reasonable and perfectly valid. But if we're trying to honour yoga, the ancient, thousands of years old practice of yoga, then we should really understand why yoga came to be and what the ancient yogis were practicing yoga for. Traditionally, yoga was a pathway towards enlightenment, towards inner peace. Modern yoga is based upon the same principles as that traditional ancient yoga that's thousands of years old. And the pathway that is followed in modern yoga is based around the 8 limbs of yoga. Now this comes from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. This text, which is thought to be somewhere between about 1700 and 2000 years old, possibly even older than that, which was written by sage Patanjali. Within that text, he outlined this 8-limb path towards enlightenment. And these are the 8 limbs that we still follow today. So I'll whiz through them very quickly if you're not familiar with them, but if you want to learn a bit more about them in more detail, then that's exactly what we've been talking about in the previous episodes of this series. The 8 limbs of yoga are, the first 2 are yamas and niyamas. These are the moral guidelines, moral disciplines that we should try and live by in our day-to-day lives. The third is asana, which is the physical part of the practice, the poses. The 4th limb is pranayama. This is our breathing, breath control, using the breath in different ways to steady the mind and the nervous system, to settle our energetic body. Then the 5th limb is pratyagara, which is withdrawal from the senses. So moving our focus from the external world, from the things that we see and hear, and taking our focus inward, closing the eyes. The 6th limb is dharana. This is focused concentration, bringing our mind to a fixed point of focus and trying to stay there. Then we may move on to dhyana, which is the 7th limb, which is the concept of meditation, moving into this state of meditation where there are nice long gaps between our thoughts and we have these moments of stillness in the mind. So those are the first 7, and then by practicing these and going through these different stages, we may find that we arrive at this 8th limb, Samadhi. So Samadhi is not something you can do or you can practice, but it's a state of being that may present itself to you, may become accessible through regular practice of all of these other limbs. Samadhi is a steady state of peace and contentment, where there are no thoughts. We don't have these noisy, intrusive thoughts that we usually have in our daily lives. Instead, the mind is much more calm and clear. So of course, you still use your brain when you need to use it, when you need to analyze something, when you need to give something some thought, but you have control over your thoughts. So you can almost pick your brain up like a tool and use it when you need it, and then put it back down once you're done with it and allow there to be just this steadiness and calm and quiet. The word Samadhi means to become one with the source. So it's recognizing and knowing and feeling that you are the same universal energy as everything else that exists, all other beings and objects in the universe. So in the modern world, should we be striving for enlightenment? Should we be trying to reach that? How is it relevant? How is it accessible in the modern world? Well, it's definitely much more difficult to arrive at that sort of state because we don't really know much about it in our modern Western world. We're constantly told that to be happy and to be peaceful with our lives, we need to have money, power, status, and stuff. And that the more of all of those things that we have, the happier we'll be. And everything we see in advertisements and media reinforces that concept that we need lots of stuff and we need money to be successful, for our lives to have meaning, for us to be happy. But deep down we know that that is not the truth. We know that buying more stuff and having more money doesn't bring us more happiness. Yes, we might have more little spikes of happiness when we buy something new that we really want or when we go on a fancy holiday, but our baseline of how we feel on a day-to-day basis, our happiness level doesn't really change when we have millions and millions of pounds. So how can we be happy and content and peaceful in our lives, which really is what we're all striving for? That's the one thing that connects us all as humans, is that we spend our lives searching for happiness, for being at peace, being content with what we have, and not constantly seeking and striving for more. Well, there's good news and bad news here. The good news is we do have the power within us to find this sense of inner peace and to live a life of tranquility, of being content with what we have and feeling peaceful and joyful. But the bad news is it's not easy. It's not easy to get there because we have to go through these different stages like meditation, and we have to become at peace with being by ourselves, being in solitude and being alone with our thoughts. And that can be a really scary thing because to go inward, and that's where we have to go to find this peace, we know that it doesn't really come from the external world, from possessions and money and things like that. That peace that we want to feel comes from within us. But to get to that point, we have to confront all of the stuff that comes up when we sit with ourselves in stillness, when we notice our thoughts. We have to confront our fears, our past traumas, our negative, intrusive thoughts. We have to confront our mistakes, feelings of shame and guilt, all of these things that are part of the human experience. We have to get to a point where we can sit in stillness and work through all of those things to sort of come out of the other end and be able to be at peace and to feel content. And through thousands of years of humans existing, we know that this is the only way to get to that point of being enlightened, of being at peace throughout your life. But it's not easy. It's much easier to go out and buy a new car or buy a new house or go on holiday, because that gives us a much quicker little hit of happiness and joy. There are various different ways to navigate your way to that point of being at peace, being enlightened, but the pathway of yoga is one that's sort of tried and tested. This 8-limb path towards enlightenment is something that's been followed for thousands of years. So this is why modern yoga is based upon that 8-step path. And it's important to note here that it isn't a sort of linear path where you master the first limb and then you move on to the second one and the third one and, going all the way through. It is something that you'll move through at different stages in your life. So you may find that initially when you start practicing yoga, you're more focused on the asana, the poses, because that's usually where we start in modern yoga. And then you might find after a while that you're more interested in the breathing, in pranayama, and how that changes you. It may be that then you start to dip back into the first limbs of the yamas and niyamas, and you start to understand a bit more about the way that living your life and having these different moral disciplines can affect your ability to be at peace with yourself and to feel calm. And then later in life or further on into your practice, you might start to go into meditation and understand on a deeper level how that can change you. So we can jump around through those different limbs, or through the first 7 limbs, I suppose, and then at some stage you may find that that final 8th limb, Samadhi, becomes a part of you and your life. I'd love to say that I'm telling you all of this from my experience of being an enlightened guru, but sadly that's not the case. I am just like you, working my way through these different limbs and trying to understand a bit more about how to use them in my life, how I can be more at peace with me and myself, and how I can share that with the yogis that I teach. So that is my understanding of Samadhi, of this final limb of yoga, the concept of inner peace and enlightenment. But there is so much information about this out there in the world, on the internet. There's lots of YouTube videos, lots of articles online, and of course this original text, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, is a very good one to read if you want to learn a bit more. I hope you found this useful or interesting. Please ask if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below and I will get back to you. Remember to give this video a little like if you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Thank you for watching.